Government and Politics. Government of Australia and Politics of Australia. Elizabeth II, Queen of Australia. David Hurley, Governor-General of Australia. Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia. Australia is a federal parliamentary constitutional monarchy. The country has maintained a stable liberal democratic political system under its constitution, which is one of the world's oldest, since federation in 1901. It is also one of the world's oldest federations, in which power is divided between the federal and state and territorial governments. The Australian system of government combines elements derived from the political systems of the United Kingdom, a fused executive, constitutional monarchy and strong party discipline, and the United States, federalism, a written constitution and strong bicameralism, with an elected upper house, along with distinctive indigenous features. The federal government is separated into three branches: legislature, the bicameral parliament, comprising the monarch, represented by the Governor-General, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, executive, the Federal Executive Council, which in practice gives legal effect to the decisions of the Cabinet, comprising the Prime Minister and other Ministers of State appointed by the Governor-General on the advice of Parliament. Judiciary, the High Court of Australia and other federal courts, whose judges are appointed by the Governor-General on advice of Parliament. Elizabeth I reigns as Queen of Australia and is represented in Australia by the Governor-General at the federal level and by the governors at the state level, who by convention act on the advice of her ministers. Thus, in practice, the Governor-General acts as a legal figurehead for the actions of the Prime Minister and the Federal Executive Council. The Governor-General does have extraordinary reserve powers, which may be exercised outside the Prime Minister's request, in rare and limited circumstances, the most notable exercise of which was the dismissal of the Whitlam government in the constitutional crisis of 1975. A large white and cream-colored building with grass on its roof. The building is topped with a large flagpole. Parliament House, Canberra. In the Senate, the upper house, there are 76 senators, 12 each from the states and 2 each from the mainland territories, the Australian Capital Territory and the Northern Territory. The House of Representatives, the lower house, has 151 members, elected from single-member electoral divisions, commonly known as electorates, or seats, allocated to states on the basis of population, with each original state guaranteed a minimum of 5 seats. Elections for both chambers are normally held every 3 years simultaneously. Senators have overlapping 6-year terms except for those from the territories, whose terms are not fixed but are tied to the electoral cycle. For the lower house, thus only 40 of the 76 places in the Senate are put to each election, unless the cycle is interrupted by a double dissolution. Australia's electoral system uses preferential voting for all lower house elections, with the exception of Tasmania and the ACT, which, along with the Senate and most state upper houses, combine it with proportional representation in a system known as the single transferable vote. Voting is compulsory for all enrolled citizens 18 years and over in every jurisdiction, as is enrollment. The party with majority support in the House of Representatives forms the government and its leader becomes Prime Minister. In cases where no party has majority support, the Governor-General has the constitutional power to appoint the Prime Minister and, if necessary, dismiss one that has lost the confidence of Parliament. Due to the relatively unique position of Australia operating as a Westminster parliamentary democracy with an elected upper house, the system has sometimes been referred to as having a Washminster mutation or as a semi-parliamentary system. There are two major political groups that usually form government, federally and in the states, the Australian Labor Party and the Coalition, which is a formal grouping of the Liberal Party and its minor partner, the National Party. The Liberal National Party and the Country Liberal Party are merged state branches in Queensland and the Northern Territory that function as separate parties at a federal level within Australian political culture. The Coalition is considered centre-right and the Labor Party is considered centre-left. Independent members and several minor parties have achieved representation in Australian parliaments, mostly in upper houses. The Australian Greens are often considered the third force in politics, being the third largest party by both vote and membership. The most recent federal election was held on 22 May 2022 and resulted in the Australian Labor Party, led by Anthony Albanese, being elected to government. States and territories. States and territories of Australia. Australia has 6 states: New South Wales, NSW, Queensland, QLD, South Australia, SA, Tasmania, TAS, Victoria, VIC, and Western Australia, WA, and 3 mainland territories: the Australian Capital Territory, ACT, the Northern Territory, NT, and the Jervis Bay Territory, JVT. In most respects, the ACT and NT function as states, except that the Commonwealth Parliament has the power to modify or repeal any legislation passed by the territory parliaments. Under the Constitution, the states essentially have plenary legislative power to legislate on any subject, whereas the Commonwealth, federal, Parliament may legislate only within the subject areas enumerated under Section 51. For example, state parliaments have the power to legislate with respect to education, criminal law and state police, health, transport, and local government, but the Commonwealth Parliament does not have any specific power to legislate in these areas. However, Commonwealth laws prevail over state laws to the extent of the inconsistency. Each state and major mainland territory has its own parliament unicameral. In the Northern Territory, the ACT and Queensland, and bicameral in the other states. The states are sovereign entities, although subject to certain powers of the Commonwealth as defined by the Constitution. The lower houses are known as the Legislative Assembly, the House of Assembly in South Australia and Tasmania. The upper houses are known as the Legislative Council. The head of the government in each state is the Premier and in each territory the Chief Minister. The Queen is represented in each state by a governor and in the Northern Territory the Administrator. In the Commonwealth, the Queen's representative is the Governor-General. The Commonwealth Parliament also directly administers the external territories of Ashmore and Cartier Islands, Christmas Island, the Cocos, Huon Islands, the Coral Sea Islands, Heard Island and McDonald Islands, and the claimed region of Australian Antarctic Territory, as well as the internal Jervis Bay Territory, a naval base and seaport for the national capital in land that was formerly part of New South Wales. The external territory of Norfolk Island previously exercised considerable autonomy under the Norfolk Island Act 1979 through its own legislative assembly and an administrator to represent the Queen. In 2015, the Commonwealth Parliament abolished self-government, integrating Norfolk Island into the Australian tax and welfare systems and replacing its legislative assembly with a council. Macquarie Island is part of Tasmania and Lord Howe Island of New South Wales.